for Dr. J.
Nothing gets in the way of great hair.
We're rolling.
I stand by what I said. Great hair. You're lucky you have great hair. Not everyone does.
What did Lehman say this morning? Going bald.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going gray.
I'm just going.
It's going.
My hair is gray and brown. But it's not that obtrusive, awful gray color. It's cool. I'm cool with it.
I thought about using my government cheese laptop, but I thought, no, that'd probably be a bad idea because it's theirs, not mine.
That's right.
It does have a better battery. What was the Bionic Man thing? We built him better, faster.
Yep. That's right.
Sorry. I'm eating my lunch. There's a
Bacon and
lovely
cheese.
croissant from the Cozy Cannoli.
They make good stuff there.
They're really good. All right, Jason.
Very professional.
Yeah. Best podcast episode ever. Right here, Gatsby. All right. Before we go any further, if you like what you see, click the like button. Click subscribe if you want to follow us. Check us out on Substack. It's thebetafiles.substack.com.
Huzzah.
Huzzah. All right. Gatsby.
So it's kind of like Shakespeare for me, right?
Yeah.
I know it's the greatest American novel ever,
Mm-hmm.
but if you ask me to talk about it on a scholarly level, I find that exceedingly difficult because I'm such a fanboy.
Mm-hmm.
Same with Faulkner.
Tell the story of what Gatsby did for you.
So I'm visually impaired and reading by eye is very painful. And all the way through school, I didn't have any kind of assistive technology. I had large print texts, but they still hurt. And then I got into high school, into honors English, and they told me, we've gotten you some books on tape from Library for the Blind. Our first assignment in honors English as a freshman was The Great Gatsby.
Mm-hmm.
And I just resented the hell out of it, you know, because I'm like, this is going to be awful. I don't want to listen to this shit. And started reading around 8 o'clock that night and didn't stop reading until 2 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
And I fell in love with it. And I realized this is what reading's like.
Mm-hmm.
And that book gave me the desire to be a writer and to teach English in college. And I don't think I would have gotten there without that book.
The writing. That's interesting. You've never mentioned that before.
Yeah, well, I
Because you're a poet.
I'm a poet. Well, I didn't want to be a poet. I wanted to be a novelist.
Right.
And then, aside from realizing I just didn't have the natural talent to write novels, it's gone, by the way. Aside from realizing I didn't have any natural talent as a novelist, I got into poetry my senior year in college and never looked back.
Yeah. Okay.
So that was the power of that novel. It started everything for me.
Right.
It was the beginning. So I owe him that. And I suspect I'm not the only one who discovered that book and that changed the course of their life. I think it's probably, if you were to talk to people, it's a pretty common story.
Well, with me, it was Les Mis.
Yeah.
Les Mis was what flipped the switch. My history of Gatsby is, we talked, well, obviously we talked about this last week when video died. Ugh.
Video killed the radio star.
Video killed the podcast star. Like we're podcast stars. We are to our 11 fans. Cheers to you. No, my history of Gatsby, read in high school. Didn't really think much of it. It's not taught the right way in high school.
It's not.
Got into undergrad, read it again in American Lit. Kind of grew in importance, but still didn't really get it. Then I took a class on modern American fiction. And we read it there. And he's the one who said, pay attention to Myrtle. Focus on that.
On the what?
Myrtle.
On Myrtle.
Focus on that. He's the one that taught us that. And then this book opened up to me. And that's when I fell in love with Gatsby. Because in high school they showed us the Redford movie.
Yeah.
Which
is really good.
It's the best one.
It is.
The Leo one does a couple of things that are really cool, but it's the Redford version that is the best.
Well, you talked about Jordan in the Leo one. She was so good.
She is the Jordan I've always pictured.
Me too.
And I've probably read this. I don't know how many times I've read this book. I've read this book so many fucking times. And but I teach it differently than what they're used to. One of the big things is, and I think we started the podcast last week when we did this the first time, with the myths of Gatsby, right? The first big one is those freaking eyes, Dr. Eckelberg's eyes, right?
They're not God.
They're not God. They are you.
The reader.
You're the reader. You are God. George Wilson says it's like the eyes of God are watching us. But it's not the eyes of God because you are God in this scenario. Which means you're watching him. And Nick knows it. The other characters know it. But specifically Nick. Because the way he constructs it. The Valley of Ashes represents reality. Because that's where the lower classes are. Right?
Which we can come back to that.
And we're going to come back to that.
I think you have to.
Yeah, well, we're going to talk about the actual narrative of The Great Gatsby. Because The Great Gatsby is Romeo and Juliet. And we've already talked about Romeo and Juliet on this podcast when we talked about the Bard. Fitzgerald's doing the same thing. So, a couple of things. So that's the first myth. The second myth, is that this is a straight narrative. It's not.
No.
In fact, I'm going to get into this here in a minute.
There are a lot of tricks in that.
There's a lot of tricks.
Yep.
He's covering. And the third myth is that Gatsby's a central character. He's not. Daisy's the central character.
Yeah.
She's pulling the strings the whole time. You have to watch how Nick manipulates the narrative, manipulates the storyline, and you'll see how he's covering for her the whole time.
Well, and she's manipulating him.
She is.
Which is why he tells the story the way he does.
Yep.
We don't have the same story if she's not manipulative.
Exactly.
Or controlling.
And we understand from the beginning that she knows what she's doing. Because that conversation, we'll get into that later when we talk about his conversation with her. But the biggest thing that everybody knows, it's not a myth, is that he's an unreliable narrator. He's extremely unreliable. You can't trust him.
No. But he's wonderful.
He is. He's wonderful because he's unreliable. Best narrator ever. Most unreliable narrator ever. Best narrator ever. Because he manipulates the crap out of you the whole freaking time. And you can't tell what is real and what's not real.
Maybe a trick that Fitzgerald learned from Poe.
Probably. It's funny because our shared student, Tim Daniel, noted, he's like, well, if it's all a lie, what's the point in reading it? I asked him, you realize this is a fictional novel, right? It's not real to begin with. So why are you getting angry? Are you getting angry at Nick, who's a fictional narrator, telling you a bunch of lies?
Then he hung up on you.
Yeah.
Which is amusing. Ah!
Ah. And I asked him, I said, do you have internet problems? Yeah. He's funny. He's a good kid.
He is a good kid.
Very smart kid. You got to sit in on our Superman thing today.
That was entertaining.
Yes.
I would have never thought to teach that in a lit class.
It's American Lit.
Never would have occurred to me.
It's American Story.
Yeah.
It's freaking Superman.
And it's an American art form.
It is. Totally an American art form.
Invented by William Blake. he does what looks like comic books, man.
I know.
He's so good.
Ah.
But it's the newspapers that really
It
make
is.
it popular.
Mhm. So anyway, sorry.
We've
So, yeah.
rambled.
Yeah, we've rambled. Have to do some editing. Oops. Okay. So, Nick, I don't want to do Gatsby anymore. I'm so burned on it. I just spent 2 weeks teaching it. I'm still teaching it now.
We can turn this off and just talk.
We
Sorry,
just
sorry,
talk.
kids.
We can just talk and do a podcast of us talking. That was the whole point to begin with when we started the podcast.
Books that changed our lives.
Okay.
And so for me, first it was Gatsby.
It was Gatsby for me. It was Les Mis.
It was never poetry until my senior year in college, with the exception of Shakespeare, Chaucer, and Milton.
Right.
And Shakespeare changed me permanently because there they go again.
I'll get them.
The first thing I remember reading by Shakespeare that obviously I read Julius Caesar and Romeo and Juliet, but they had no impact on me whatsoever. I just didn't care. And then I read Henry IV Part 1. I'm like, oh my God, I have arrived. Because it's so good.
It is.
Because you've got his best comic character, Falstaff.
Yeah.
And then you get to 2, and it's like, you really feel bad for him. But Hal doesn't have a
Falstaff or
choice. Both, I think. Because Hal has to grow up, and that means Falstaff has got to go.
The real kicker is Henry V when he denies Falstaff.
Yes.
That's the heartbreaker.
It's awful. It's awful. Oh, it's awful.
Books that change it. So Gatsby, we've already talked about. I'll edit that. Les Mis for me was the big one. Sophomore.
Why?
Sophomore in high school. First of all, it was the biggest book I'd ever read at that point.
It was an achievement.
It was an achievement, but the story was good. You fall in love. It didn't go anywhere. It went right there.
Okay.
You fall in love with the next convict, and you root for him. And this kid that he adopts in cassette. And you get to see behind the scenes of the French Revolution and see how the common people dealt with the revolution, the commoners. And then, of course, the aftermath of the revolution.
And I'm ashamed to say it as an English major, I have not read it. But I have been told over and over again that I have to read that book.
It's fantastic. The next great one that impacted me was with Mice and Men.
Yep.
The ending to that book. You don't know what to do with it. You know he's going to put him in a better place. But you also know that this is his partner. What's life going to be like for him when he's gone?
Yeah.
This is the beauty of Steinbeck. It's like the Winter of Our Discontent at the end. He's in that cave. He's waiting for the water to catch up, and he reaches into his pocket. Damn it if she didn't put that in his pocket. And so now he's trapped.
The Steinbeck that got to me was Grapes of Wrath.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay, the ending. Weirdest ending ever.
yeah. It's such a powerful book. And through that 4 years, I realized more and more I've got to do this for a living. Because I can't think of anything better. I didn't want to teach high school.
Yeah.
Because I thought high school was a joke. I was right, of course.
Sophomore year, I decided I was going to do a book report. One of the books that we could choose, I didn't decide to do a book report. One of the books we got to choose for our book report was David Copperfield.
You hated it.
I had heard all this great stuff about Dickens. I knew about Oliver Twist. I knew about Christmas Carol. So I thought, oh, this is supposed to be the good one, the big one. And I read it. Worst decision of my life. If you want a book that's going to bore you into a migraine, that is the book for you.
Or a coma.
Oh my God, that book. It was so bad, he rewrote it.
And made Great Expectations,
And
which is a truly great book.
That's another one that changed my life.
And that book is not boring.
Had a huge impact. No, you do not get bored with Pip.
I read some weird books in high school. I look back at it. Like when I was in AP English,
Yeah.
they, well, not they, she, Miss Wiggs, first day of class, she said, you've got to read Albert Camus' The Stranger by tomorrow. Get to work. And I read it. And it took me forever. It's only 120 pages, but there's a lot happening in that book. And I got to school the next day. She gave us a prompt. She said, write an essay now. And we got our essay grades back the next day, and I got like a B.
Yeah.
This is the lowest grade I'd gotten on an English assignment in my life. I thought about dropping the class. And there were 20 people in that room the day we wrote that essay. There were 10 the next day.
So she weeded him out.
She weeded them out. She wanted to see who would stick it out. I mean, I probably deserved an A on it, but she wasn't about to give me an A. And we read some powerful books. We read Crime and Punishment that year.
Yeah. This freshman?
As a senior in AP English.
Senior.
Yeah, the freshman year was when I discovered
Gatsby.
Gatsby. But we read we read stuff that was really beyond us. And I thought, she's really cool because she thinks we can do this.
Yeah.
I had so much fun in that class. But we read that. I think we read parts of Paradise Lost. We read Chaucer. We had to memorize the general prologue in Middle English, of course.
We had to do that, yeah.
You do that. That's what you do.
That's what you do senior year. You memorize the freaking prologue. All I remember is the first line.
Juan that apero with the shura sota.
There you go.
The dracht of March hath passed into the rota.
Yeah.
And bothered every vein in sweet.
Okay, stop.
I only know the first 10 lines.
I only remember the first line.
I've forgotten a lot. Well, you remember, and Eliot's take on that.
Yeah.
April is the cruelest month.
Yeah.
He's taking Chaucer
and re-envisioning
and
it.
re-envisioning it.
That's what we'll do next week. We'll do The Wasteland. Yeah, we were going to do Gatsby, but I've taught it for 2 weeks now, and
For your viewers who think I don't talk enough,
yeah.
I think they won't have a problem with me next week.
No, they won't.
Because I have very strong opinions about The Wasteland.
So you're talking about Shakespeare.
Yeah.
I got into Shakespeare with Julius Caesar.
Yeah.
So I did freshman year of high school. We did Romeo and Juliet, and then we had to do a project on another one. And I chose Caesar because I was like, okay, that's cool, blood.
Why not?
I didn't know Titus Andronicus at that point, thank God.
Oh my God.
But Julius Caesar seemed cool to me because it was an action flick.
It is an action flick.
And I fell in love.
It's a great play.
It's a great play, and he was a great storyteller.
But I mean,
I didn't get Hamlet until I was in college.
I don't recall reading Hamlet until college. And I recall when I did read it thinking, this is the greatest work of literature
Yeah,
ever
this
written.
is great.
And
yeah.
no one has changed my mind since then.
Well, and the thing is, I went into it with, you remember Looney Tunes, right?
Yep.
There's an episode with Bugs Bunny, doing the whole, and they did this with Tiny Toons too. Warner Brothers was constantly bringing this motif back, right?
Yorick.
Yep, with Yorick, always the head. But you always got this impression, in our culture, you got this impression that he was whiny. Hamlet was whiny.
Yeah.
And I remember when I read it, I thought, he's not whiny. This dude is awesome.
He is.
And I think it was during my stint in college was when the Branagh version came out.
Oh, I was in grad school, and I loved it.
Yeah, that about the right time because I was an undergrad.
Yep. It was a deeply stirring story. And actually, I took a Shakespeare class at UNC, and I thought, I need to be a Shakespeare scholar.
Yeah,
I went through that for a while.
right. You
And
got the folio.
Yeah. I got that when I was at Cambridge.
Yeah.
Because I was just going through the bookshops, and I found it. I'm like, this is really expensive, but when am I going to get a chance to buy this again? Because this is pre-Amazon. This is 1997.
Yeah.
So when you saw a book you wanted, you damn well better get it now.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's no guarantee you'll ever see it again. I mean, there was a certain amount of pressure in buying books back then that if you saw one you really loved,
Better get it.
you better get it. Even if you have to give a kidney for it, you better get it.
My dad had the Oxford, Volume 1, Volume 2.
The Oxford is still the gold standard.
Yeah.
I don't own the Oxford.
This is from the 60s.
Yeah. I don't have the Oxford, I have the Riverside. That's actually so Shakespeare. I went through a lot of twists and turns in college to get to English. I started out as an English major.
Mm-hmm.
Then I switched to journalism. Then I started dating this girl who had designs for me. And she encouraged me to change to business. Well, I didn't want to do that. Then I switched to economics,
Right.
which I still enjoy. And I was living with my roommate at the time, and he was in a wheelchair, and he was always hunched over in his chair. And he rolled in one day, and he said, "Here." And he gave me the Riverside Shakespeare. He spent probably $100 on that book.
Yeah.
He said, "This is what you should be doing with your life, and you know it." I changed my major the next day.
Right.
It changed the course of my life. That one book. And if I had to keep only one book in my entire library,
The Riverside.
aside from the Book of Common Prayer,
Yeah.
I mean that's first, but the Riverside is, oh my God, it was impactful. So I've had two moments that changed my life with being an English major.
I
And-
started as a history major.
I didn't know that.
I did. I've told you this. Because the Wasteland was what changed me.
That's when you became an English major?
That's when I became an English major. But I went to creative writing. Because, and I'll tell the full story about the Wasteland next week when we do the Wasteland. But, because it's been about a month since I've taught the Wasteland, I don't think I'm going to be burnt on that.
No, you'll be fine.
We'll be fine at that point. But, no, and the same professor that taught that American Lit class taught creative writing. And so I signed up for his creative writing class. And that's when I started doing script writing. I got away from prose because I've been trying to write prose for a long time at that point. See, I don't know about you. My history with writing goes all the way back to my youth. I was always writing something. I made my own comics when I was a kid.
I hated writing, and I guess the great irony is that I was always the best writer in my school.
Right.
I just didn't want to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, I was writing, no, okay, I take it back. So since 7th grade, I had written poetry. I mean, it was bad. Oh, it was awful.
Well,
it was
yeah.
for girls.
Yeah.
That's
Well,
why
that's
you
how
write.
I got started.
You write for girls, and it never worked out. I was telling my class that the other day. I just wrote so many poems for women, and it still hasn't worked out. I just keep doing it, including, I mean, the most recent thing,
It got framed.
I wrote a poem for a woman who framed it.
It's in her room
It's in her room.
on a wall.
On her wall. I don't know what that means, but
First poem I wrote for a girl. freshman year. The girl's name was Natasha. We called her
Right.
Tasha. Wrote it for her. My teacher busted me writing it.
Oh.
So he comes and gets it. Mr. Smith, he was my earth science teacher, busted me writing this poem.
In class.
In class, he comes and gets it. He opens it up, glances at it, folds it, walked over to her and handed it to her. Said, "This is for you." I wanted to fucking die, like 1,000 deaths that day.
What did she say?
She told me, "I'm sorry, I don't like you that way." I was like, "You weren't supposed to get it."
This was supposed to be private.
This was supposed to be for me.
Your teacher sucks.
I know, he was bad. So, but it was cool. And then afterwards, like after class, he said, "Stick around." So everybody else leaves, and I get up and I kind of walk to his desk, all dejected, miserable. You know, now she hadn't told me that she didn't like me that way. I was just miserable because I was like, she wasn't supposed to get that.
What did he tell you?
He told me, he said, you ought to write more. He said, that was pretty decent. So,
Just not during class.
not during class, yeah. Well, I think that was understood. But yeah, she broke my heart.
Yeah, I wrote my first poems for a girl named Karen,
Yeah.
and that never went anywhere. So, never works out.
Never works out.
Although you write a poem.
If you write a poem for a girl, you wait till you got them, and then you write the poem.
I've never done that, including the one who framed it. I just went ahead and, of course, I had no intention of ever showing it to her.
Yeah.
She fell in love with it.
There you go.
Not with me, but with the poem.
With the poem.
Of course, not with me, because that would break.
That
the
means
trend.
it works.
Yeah, that would break the trend. It never works. Yeah, but you wait till you get someone, and then you start writing for them. And that's when it becomes meaningful.
I switched from poems to songs.
I did too. I started learning how to write my own work, my own music, and I was doing that through college. Then my senior year in college, I had my Brit-Lit Part 2 class. I'd been putting it off for years because I knew it was a lot of poetry. I'm like, I don't read stupid poetry. Just give me fiction or Shakespeare or whatever. And I had this guy named Al Benthal. He was a grad student instructor getting his PhD in Coleridge. So he was a romanticist. And he started talking about how poetry is a physical experience, how it's not simply cerebral. It comes out of your mouth and into your ears, and you use your body. And I read William Blake that way because I took his advice, and I decided, okay, so this is good. And then about a month to 2 months in, I'm like, I've got to be a poet.
Yeah.
I've got to do it. And then I found Seamus Heaney through him. He told me to read Seamus Heaney. And I was walking through Barnes & Noble, and I was looking at the poetry section. I saw these 2 white volumes. I leaned down, started looking at him like, this guy's pretty good.
Yeah.
William Carlos Williams. And I was in love.
Yeah.
And then I spent the better part of 2 years just imitating him as much as I could. That changed me. And I haven't looked back.
So with me, it was Tarantino and Mamet.
Oh, I can see why.
Yeah.
I mean, Tarantino and Mamet use language in a way that is shocking.
And then later, I discovered Sorkin.
Sorkin shocks you too with the way he uses
Yeah.
words.
Yep.
It's poetry.
It is poetry.
Okay.
Well, I'm trying to fix it to where when you use the table, it doesn't bounce.
Oh, I see. Yeah, I'm trying not to use the table too much. I just won't use the table during our talk. I'll just lean back.
No, you're fine. Okay, I think I got it. All right. Yeah, well, it's a little, but...
Yeah.
No, I bought, what's funny is when I was at Surrey, I bought a book called, it was by, oh God, what's his dude? Sigmund something. It wasn't Freud. It was like Sigmund.
Sigmund Reed?
Yeah.
Are you serious?
Yeah. Scriptwriter.
That was a guess.
Sigmund, he studied. I've still got it. It's actually in my office at G-Tech, but it was the mechanics of writing a screenplay, and I learned so much about narrative from that book, because of course he talks about the 3-act, the 4-act, and the 5-act arcs, right? The paradigms, and of course with a 90-minute script, you're looking at a 3-act. Broken up into 3 30-minute segments, right? You go beyond that, you get towards the 120-minute mark, you get into the 4-act, 5-act territory. And there's one chapter on Shakespearean theory. That's where the 7 plots come from.
That's where you learned about them?
That's where I learned about the 7 plots. Yeah, I learned so much from that one book.
From Sigmund Reed?
Yeah. Like I said, it's in my office. That one, and there's another book from a dude named David something. Starts with a W.
Was Reed a playwright too?
Yeah.
I've never read it.
So now in the book, he uses Chinatown as the example.
Okay.
And so you go through the entire book and he breaks down Chinatown and how it works mechanically. Because supposedly, even to this day, not the movie, the script for Chinatown is like the gold standard. That's the one. Yeah, when they teach this stuff, they use Chinatown as the template, right? There's another book on playwriting that I had from this guy named David something that talked about the mechanics of the play, the script. Because there's different types of scripts. You've got the play, then you've got the screenplay, and then you got the teleplay.
Which are very different from each other.
Yes.
You can't think about writing them the same way.
No, and you can't approach them the same way.
No.
The beauty of the screenplay, and the screenplay is the easiest to write of the 3, because there are no limits. With the play and the teleplay, you're limited. With the teleplay, it's time. You have a specific amount of time that you're under constraints from. And so you've got to get the narrative built in a way that makes it through that time period as economically as possible. With the play, it's physical restraints. You've only got so much that you can do with reality, right? And you have to allow the audience's imagination to take over, to take control. And so that's where writing plays becomes difficult.
Right.
With the screenplay, none of that applies.
No. You can
do whatever you want.
Yep. You can break all of Aristotle's rules about keeping it constrained within a certain time period.
Yeah.
You can stretch it over decades.
Yeah. That's the thing, right? So that's the beauty of the screenplay over the other 2. And so that's where I started. I started writing screenplays. And then when I got to App, they had a playwriting, for the BFA, they had a playwriting avenue. And so I was like, I'll do that, because they didn't have screenwriting or telewriting, right? So I was like, okay, we'll do the plays. And I did that. And that's how I was trained to write scripts. But I started out, I have never been able to finish prose.
Why didn't you get, well, with the exception of your Substack articles?
Well, and the thing with the Substack articles are short, abbreviated things.
Pithy.
And this is why I'm going to do the novel as a serialized thing. I can finish it that way.
Yeah.
Because instead of thinking of it as this long piece, I'm thinking of it as little pieces that are building to this final resolution.
But see, and I don't want to out you. I mean, yes, I do, actually. I really do. You have certain reservations.
Yeah.
I'm trying to be polite here. About MFA programs, but you would be the ideal candidate for an MFA in creative writing and script writing.
I know.
It would have made sense for you.
Yeah.
And I think it would have been really good.
They didn't have that at UNCG. It's either fiction or poetry. I would have done that, but there's no program.
Well, there is, but you would have to
I
go
think it's
halfway across the
Wilmington.
country.
I think,
Oh,
well,
Wilmington's
yeah,
got
I'd
it.
go across country, but I think Wilmington's got it. I take that back. I think their MFA has a script writing component.
I mean, that's surprising. You'd figure that most of these places would do it.
Yeah.
It's not hard to hire a single playwright.
But also, you have to look at the conditions. When I did go to grad school, I was forced into it because of what had happened with the economy in '08.
Yeah. Oh, I know.
And so it was practicality. It was what's going to be the practical thing. Lit's the practical thing, because there's no way I'm doing comp. Sorry.
Comp rep? No.
Yeah. No, I'm not a comp rep guy.
Well, I like teaching it, but I don't want to do my research on it.
Now, I would have done rhetoric if they'd had just a rhetoric MA.
To do rhetoric, it's a shame you didn't know this then. You could have done a communications major and focused on rhetoric,
Yeah.
because that's where you do rhetoric now.
But then I would have been teaching comp, not English.
You'd have been teaching comm, yeah.
Yeah. So,
Might have been happier.
no.
I'm not public speaking. That's for the
Yeah.
birds. But
And that's what I would have gotten. And just like I got, 111 as soon as I came out of grad school.
also harder to get a job in comm than it is
Yeah, it
English,
is.
because we're everywhere, and you need us.
Well, it's funny because when I transferred up to App, they had an orientation for transfer students, and they told us the English degree is more versatile than you think, because a lot of these major corporations, now this is 2000. The corporations were looking for English majors because two reasons. Number one, we had great marketing skills. We understood rhetoric. We understood how rhetoric works. And secondly, because we were more, at the time, the English degree was more critical thinking focused than it is now.
Yeah.
They've gotten away from that. All the universities have gotten away from that.
That's why one of our most important courses here is critical thinking.
Critical thinking.
Because they're not getting it other places,
They're not. And the major degrees are pulling away from it.
which is ridiculous.
It is.
So you got into screenwriting
Yep.
and playwriting
Yeah.
through Mamet and Tarantino.
And Kevin Smith.
37.
How? I can't believe it. Well, what? You sucked 37 dicks. No. What's great is when she comes up with snowballing. I said, "What the fuck is that?"
Oh, that's horrifying.
So
This is Clerks, right?
it's Clerks, and that's the movie.
And one of the great ones, because the way they deliver their lines, it is so fast.
It is.
You can't get
Well, and
bored with a Kevin Smith film.
Mallrats. Mallrats is another one.
It's fast.
It's super fast, and the scripts are so like that the whole
Well,
time.
what makes him so good?
And Tarantino's like that. See, Pulp Fiction was the one that caught my attention with Tarantino.
Yeah, well,
I hadn't seen Reservoir Dogs yet. Then I went back. and
Reservoir
watched
Dogs is
Reservoir
incredible.
Dogs,
It's my
and
favorite.
that blew my mind.
what's great about Kevin Smith is that for 2 hours, he can get characters to talk about absolutely nothing. Nothing relevant happens
Yeah.
in a Kevin Smith film,
And yet,
and
you
it's
can't-
wonderful.
Yeah, you can't take away from. Well, it's like in Mallrats when he's talking about the engagement. He's like, "When are you gonna pop the question on the Jaws ride? When the shark pops out of the water?" So, oh my God, that's romantic.
And that's what's so good about him. And I think if you were to ask him, he would not be offended by someone saying that his movies are about nothing.
Yeah,
Because they're just people living.
yeah.
But he keeps you riveted somehow.
does.
And I don't know how he pulls it off. Maybe
No.
it's because it's
It's snappy the
It's
whole way through.
fast.
It is.
how do you write that fast?
Chasing Amy.
Oh,
my
God.
Yeah. No, that was another one. I was like, holy shit. My favorite part of that whole movie is when he draws when Jason Lee's sitting there in front of his art table. He's got Ben Affleck. He said, "Let me draw you something." He draws out like this crossroad, right? And there's one where it's like Santa Claus, the Easter Bunny, the man-hating militant lesbian, and the man-loving lesbian. He said, what do all these have in common, right? The Santa Claus, the Easter Bunny, and the man-loving lesbian.
Oh,
They're all figments of your fucking imagination. He said, the only one that's real is the man-hating lesbian.
oh my God.
It's so funny.
It's a great film. So that's how you got introduced.
Yeah,
And
those
how
guys.
did you feel about American Buffalo? I know that Glengarry
Oh.
Glen Ross is your favorite, right?
Glengarry Glen Ross was the first thing I ever saw.
For me, it was.
And
it
that was the first
American
time I
Buffalo.
saw Spacey.
First time I saw. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Oh my
But
God.
Alec Baldwin, when he comes in with those brass balls.
He's such an asshole. He's such a great
Okay,
character.
so the
And
thing
that's
about
not in the play.
that's not in the play. He's talked about in the play, but what Mamet did was
Writes him into the movie.
He writes him into the movie for time, because the play's short,
Yes, it is.
right? It won't make 90 minutes on screen, and so he writes that part to build out. Another great Mamet film is State and Maine.
That's a great film.
Oh
I
my
like when they reseal the caps on the water bottles. You keep selling it back to them.
Yeah.
How did he come up with that shit?
That's probably real,
I probably saw it somewhere.
right? He was on set and he saw it. That and they keep changing the title of the movie because they keep having to move to different towns. the director of photography breaks the window so he can get the camera in there. He just, middle of the night, he walks up, picks up a rock, just throws it, busts the window, and walks off. So he can get his fucking camera in there.
God. For me, the Mamet I fell in love with, and I came at him from a poet's perspective, was American Buffalo. First I saw the Dennis Franz version.
Jesus.
Dustin Hoffman
Yeah.
is a perfect Mamet actor.
Yeah.
But I'm watching it, and then I read it, I'm like, he cusses all the time.
Yeah.
And then you realize the cussing is almost poetic, because who comes up with cuss words like cocksucking fuckhead? Only Mamet, because no one cusses that way.
Yeah.
It's just Mamet.
Yeah.
And it's because he's elevating the language
Right.
in a way that Shakespeare, I think, would be proud of.
Right.
We still on?
Yeah, we're still good.
Okay.
We're still on. Keep
But
going.
I love Mamet.
Well-
And if you read the plays, he breaks the lines like poetry
Yeah.
to indicate to the actors, this is how I want you to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Or when he puts shit in parentheses, you have no idea why.
Yeah.
And I don't think he ever clarifies that shit.
No, he doesn't.
Well, you were affected by Sam Shepard too.
Yeah, I bought,
Buried Child?
yep. Well, no, I bought the first Sam Shepard book I bought was a collection of his plays. And
You read it pretty quickly?
I did, and I fell in love with him because I didn't realize he was the guy who played Jaeger.
Yes.
And it wasn't until after that I was like, holy crap, that's the guy who played Jaeger.
He's in Still Magnolias too.
Yeah.
And he's
Oh,
great in that movie.
He
was great in everything.
Yeah.
Cancer?
Yeah.
And he wasn't that old.
No.
And he wrote all these great plays,
Oh
and
my
nobody knew him as a playwright.
Insane.
Everyone thought Sam Shepard was an actor.
Yeah.
But he was, as good as he was as an actor, he's probably a better playwright.
Yeah. Well, yeah. He was an amazing playwright.
He's going to be near the top of that list.
He is, the other playwright that influenced me later was Neil Simon.
I haven't read Neil Simon yet.
His stuff is just fucking unreal.
Trouble?
No.
I started getting into other poets after Williams that I'd never heard of. That was the most exciting part for me, is I don't discover writers as much as I used to.
Yeah.
Because I've read, it's not bragging, I've read so much, it's hard to find a new one.
Yeah.
But then, man, when you're young, you're like, oh my God, another book.
Yeah.
I've never heard of this guy. Who is this? Who is
Yeah.
this Sam Shepard guy?
Yeah.
Holy fuck.
Yeah, okay, so with Sam Shepard, this goes true for Neil Simon too. The beauty of Shepard's characters, they're real people.
Yes.
Mamet's characters
They're
are
not
the
quite
dark
real.
side
Yeah.
of humanity.
Very.
And he focuses on those negative aspects. Because when I teach Glengarry Glen Ross, I ask them, which one of these guys do you trust? And they're like, none of them. I was like, but there's one that you can't. And he's the dirtiest one out of all of them. But the thing is, he's playing by the rules that are set up in that game.
Yep.
And he's the one you can trust. The rest of Roma, Richard Roma.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Pacino's character. He's the only one you can actually trust in Glengarry Glen Ross because he's the only one playing by the rules.
Even though he's dirty.
Even though he is the dirtiest guy. You know when he sits down with that dude to start selling him that land in Florida, you know, oh, he's a shyster from the word go. But he's playing by the rules. He's the only one out of that group that's playing by the rules because the others are trying to cut the system. And that's the beauty of that play is you're trying to figure out, okay, we're stuck in this horrible downward spiral of dark capitalism, right? That's ruining people's lives. And yet there's one redeeming character who's beaten the system.
Yep. And
made the system work for them. That's the beauty of Mamet. Now, talking about Shepard and Simon,
they're real people.
They're real people dealing with real problems and with real reactions. And that's why I love Sam Shepard, and that's why I love Neil Simon. The difference between Shepard and Simon focuses on the absurdity of life. The reason why they're so funny is they react to life the way that we react, and it's hilarious.
You talk about playwrights. The first playwright I ever read, even before Shakespeare, or maybe after,
Tennessee Williams.
Tennessee Williams.
Yeah.
I read the Glass Menagerie, and I thought, this is. How did you do that?
So yeah, I forgot all about that. That was for the longest time. That was my favorite play. Before I even thought about being a playwright, I was like,
because it's that good.
It is so fantastic.
He's
Nothing
like,
Against Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. That play is amazing. Streetcar Named Desire.
Big Daddy.
Fucking amazing. Yeah, Big Daddy.
Stella.
Oh my God. Stella.
And that's why Marlon Brando is the best Tennessee Williams actor of all time.
Well, I don't know because Elizabeth. It was Elizabeth and
Elizabeth Taylor.
Elizabeth Taylor and
was she Blanche
Paul
Dubois?
Simon. Yeah. No, she was in Cat on a Hot Tin Roof.
Oh.
And
she's Big Daddy's
Paul Simon
daughter or wife.
No. Paul Simon is Brick.
Oh.
And she is Brick's wife. I can't remember Brick's wife's name.
I can't either. That's a great play and a great movie.
Great movie. Fantastic. Paul Simon's wonderful as Brick.
He was a surprising
Not Paul Simon,
choice.
Paul Newman.
Paul Newman.
Not Paul Simon.
I was going to say.
Paul Newman. Yeah, Paul Simon. Where have you gone, Paul Newman? Fantastic. Arthur Miller, The Crucible.
For me, it was Death of a Salesman.
Mm-hmm.
The first Arthur Miller I read, and I thought, because I went through a phase where I was only reading plays. That's all I was reading.
Right.
Just refilled it. I read a lot of that stuff.
Well, the Glass Menagerie, I read as a sophomore in college. And I think it was 112. I read the Glass Menagerie because it was a hybrid. This is how screwed up comp has gotten since then. They taught a lot of lit in the comps back then.
I know.
When we were going through college.
I taught a lot of lit when I was in
that
college.
comp. Yeah.
Not anymore. Now they wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole.
They're afraid to.
Well, yeah, because the last thing you want kids to do is read good writing.
So in grad school, had a teacher. It was composition theory, who told us never teach lit in a comp class. And I remember I sat there staring at her, and I said to myself, "Watch me. I will," because that's what I had been taught. Teach lit in a comp class.
Yeah.
So I got my job at Guilford Tech, and I was doing the FIT program. The first semester, which was 111, we were doing The Dumbest Generation as the all-college read. So I was like, okay, if they're doing it in 111, I can do it in 112. So I went to my FIT, the head of the FIT program said, I want to teach a novel in 112. And he asked me, why? I said, because I was told not to, and here's what I want to do with it. He said, you were told not to? I said, yeah, and I explained it to him. But then I laid out how I was going to do it, and he said, Okay. I said, I don't agree with it. I don't think it's going to work, but you can do it. And so I ordered Ruth Hall. And I made them read Ruth Hall. I've been doing it for frickin' 11 years.
How did he respond to you doing it well?
He said, you proved me wrong. I proved him wrong a lot.
Think maybe he was doing it on purpose?
I don't know.
Setting you up to make you stronger?
I don't know. Maybe. I mean, he's been doing that for years. 20 years.
He knew what he was doing.
He knew what he was doing.
You need mentors like that.
Yeah. Now, this wasn't Cole. This was Mac.
I know.
Yeah, the head.
The head, yeah.
Cole was just like, do whatever you want. But Mac, I had to clear it by Mac so I could order the book. And I've been doing it ever since. I'm the only 112 teacher on that campus that requires a novel.
I used to do poetry. I may get back to that.
Yeah. You should.
Because I had a lot of fun doing it.
Well, that one semester you did an entire semester on Poe, right?
No, I want to.
Yeah.
I haven't yet. I want to. I got them to read The Imperfect Enjoyment in 112.
They need to.
If you don't know what that's about, check it out.
Oh, you gotta, yeah.
It's a guy's complaint to his penis.
It's wonderful.
It is. And it's not about what you think it's about.
We should do a podcast on that one.
I could talk about that poem all day.
We should do a podcast on that one. So we'll do The Wasteland next week, and then we'll figure out a way to work in The Imperfect Enjoyment.
You got to read it to him.
Yeah. Well, yeah. But so yeah, that was fun. But now going back to what we were talking about before, Williams was your spark. When did Whitman become a thing?
Much later.
Yeah. Same thing with Wordsworth.
Yeah, much later. Well, I got into Wordsworth as a result of the Brit Lit instructor I had. I fell in love with Wordsworth very quickly. I came to Whitman. I'd always liked Whitman, but I came to Whitman and really got him like 7 years ago. It took me. I was here, and I started reading him again. I'm like, I need to spend some time with him. And I started reading. I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
You know, and it's because I didn't spend a lot of time in American Lit classes, or I would have gotten him. And my American Renaissance teacher, professor, my dissertation advisor, didn't teach a lot of Whitman. He liked him.
Yeah.
But it didn't fit well into what he was doing with the course for the theme.
Right.
I disagree with him now. I think he should have included more of him.
Mm-hmm.
But I came to him really late. And I'm glad I did, because he's that good. I came to Ginsberg early.
Yeah.
And because I realized I'm not going to get what I need in a classroom. I got to do all this on my own. So everything I know about American poetry, and I'm not. This is not. Sounds brag. I know a lot about American poetry. I learned on my own, and through a 2-volume set, a 2-volume edition called Modern Poetry by critical history. It's not. There's no poems in it. It's critical history.
Oh, okay.
By a guy named David Perkins, and I started reading about Charles Olson. I started reading about Robert Creeley. I started reading about Robert Duncan. I started reading about a lot of the beats. I spent a lot of time reading about mid-20th century writers like Creeley, like Olson, like Duncan, like Denise Levertov, and that's how I got into it, through that book, because I got a sense is, okay, this guy seems to think this is the canon, and then I started reading some of these poets. I'm like, this is the canon, and this is what we're not talking to students about, and we need to talk to students about Creeley, because Creeley, we're going to look at Creeley in 100 years and think Williams, Pound, Eliot, Creeley, Ginsberg. Creeley's going to be a big name before it's over with. It's going to happen. I mean, it's already happening in circles like mine, but he's going to have to be on syllabi. Not having him on syllabi in 100 years is going to be like saying, I'm teaching a course in Romanticism. I don't know if I want to teach Wordsworth. How can you not? You can't avoid it.
Or Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner.
Or Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner. Oh, okay. Don't.
I knew that was going
So
to
I
hit
know
hard.
somebody.
We.
We know somebody who teaches a Brit-Lit class, and she skips Coleridge. I don't know if she taught any Coleridge. And one of her students who took me at the same time, she asked her,
Took me previously.
"Are we reading the Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner?" And she said, "No." Well, why the hell not? So, a lot of my favorite poetry I never took in a class. I had to learn on my own.
So you came to Ginsberg early and Whitman later. I was reverse.
You went to. You
I
came
got
to
Whitman early because I got that American Lit class where we read The Wasteland.
Yep.
I got Whitman in that one. And it wasn't until I got to App, because that was in Surrey. When I got to App, that modernism class that I took, he brought in Whitman because Pound talked about him.
Pound talks about it. Well, and
it's not until my thesis that I discovered Patria Mia,
yeah,
where Pound explains the importance of Whitman.
you broke the new wood.
He broke the new wood.
Now it's time for carving.
Yeah.
Yeah. The other poet I came to in grad school, again, without the help of any professors, was the American modernist poet Hart Crane.
Yeah.
Who basically decided, you know what? Okay, so you've written The Wasteland. Good for you.
Yeah.
I got something better. And he wrote this book-length poem called The Bridge, which is mind-blowing because it's, and this is another conversation, but this is what happens when you don't spend time around Pound, is that American poets like Wallace Stevens and Hart Crane gravitate toward an American romanticism, whereas the poets who are in Pound's circle don't gravitate toward anything that's obviously romantic.
Yeah.
They're doing something entirely different.
They're writing against it.
They're writing against it, whereas Wallace Stevens' natural inclination, Hart Crane's natural inclination to write toward romanticism.
Yeah.
And it's some of the most beautiful,
Well, and so is Williams.
touching poetry out there. Yeah, and so is Williams. But you can still see Pound in Williams.
Yeah.
There is no Pound in Wallace Stevens.
Yeah.
There is no Pound in Hart Crane.
Well, he didn't have any connection to him.
He had no connections. Neither did Crane.
The other one that we haven't talked about is Cummings.
Oh God. Okay, so I came to Cummings early,
I did too.
and I realized early on this guy's a bona fide genius.
Yeah. I got him in 4 different classes, 3 undergrads and a grad. He's amazing.
Oh my God, he's so
Grad
good.
class, we had to, one of our, I think it was the midterm, one of our grades was we had to memorize a poem
Right.
and recite it in front of the class, the entire thing. And so I chose, next to, of course, God, America, I.
Which is a great one.
Oh my God. And I read it the way that my first teacher, same guy as The Wasteland, there's a pattern here, actually dedicated my thesis to him, Dr. Jim Booth.
Over at Surrey.
Over at Surrey. But he read next to, of course, God, America, I. He read it so fast. And then he got to the end, he stops. He said, he drank slowly from a glass of water, really quietly. It was like, wow. And so that's the fashion I did it in grad school. Burned through it and then got to the end and stopped. And just very quietly delivered that last line. Same way Dr. Booth did. But no, mine was always, my favorite one by Cummings was always Oh Sweet Spontaneous. That poem, oh my God. So the way I teach Cummings, I go through, typically we go through Buffalo Bill's Defunct.
Which is my favorite.
Oh my God.
You can't do much better than Buffalo
No,
Bill's
you
Defunct.
can't. I mean, that's probably his masterpiece.
I would agree.
Buffalo Bill's Defunct, next to, of course, God, America, I. Anyone lived in a pretty how town.
Loneliness, The Leaf Falls. Do you teach that one?
No.
I love
teach
that
Oh
one.
Sweet Spontaneous, and I sing of Olaf Glad and Big. Our common student, James, he loved that one. That was his favorite.
Again,
he was a little disappointed. He came up to me after, he did come up to me after class. He waited, because we were still on teams at that point. He waited till everybody left, and I was still like futzing around with teams. He said, Mr. Barber, I said, yeah. He said, I really hate we didn't go over that one. So I'm sorry, buddy. So I just ran out of time. But he really loved that one. But I always end my Cummings lecture with, "May I feel," said he. And I don't give it to him, I just read it to him.
And then "You are mine," said she.
Yeah, and then I say, "Have a good day."
then.
And they are always, all of them are beet red because they're so embarrassed by that poem.
The poem is the aftermath of having sex with this
Yeah.
person.
Well, no, it's the act of sex, and
Yeah.
then you get to the end, and you think he is the one pressuring her the whole time, and you find out at the end,
She has control.
She's got control the whole time, and once she's got him,
Yep.
and she knows it. All that poem is amazing. It's a trap.
It's all a trap. Yeah, I came to him early on, probably I started really taking him seriously as a first-year grad student.
Yeah.
And then I taught an entire book of his poetry when I was teaching anti-establishment literature.
Yeah.
And they love that.
Yeah.
They love that.
My sweet old, etc.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah.
oh. Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of Cummings that's not
I
astounding.
know.
And
It's,
I worry that he's going to fall out of favor.
he goes in and out, but he needs to be talked about.
He does.
A lot more.
He does.
Because his poetry is just frankly mind-blowing. And it's funny because he didn't, supposedly, according to what I've heard and what I've read, he did not like it when his poetry was read out loud, but he writes it so you have to read it out loud to get it.
With very few exceptions, I
Yeah.
would agree with that statement.
He is,
But-
because you don't get the impact of Buffalo Bills unless you hear it.
But he was also, according to Williams, who met him,
Yeah.
Williams said he was a very humble man.
Yeah. Very
Unassuming, very quiet, and very kind. Like Fitzgerald was kind.
Yeah.
Like just a nice person
Yeah.
who was very shy.
Yeah.
And so he was unpresuming, didn't make a big deal about what he was. He's like the anti-Pound.
Yeah.
Pound was arrogant as shit
Yep.
because he knew how good he was.
But Pound also had a heart of gold.
He did have a heart of gold. Whereas Cummings didn't have a bone of ego in him. Not really. I mean, he was just a sweet man.
You haven't read enough.
Yeah, and Pound didn't mean that as an insult.
Yeah.
He was actually, and Williams even points out, he was really worried about me.
Yeah.
He's just worried. He was worried about his friend.
Mm-hmm.
Not, you're an idiot. It's, not, you need, Bill, you need to read more.
Yeah.
But no one read more than Pound. Pound read everything.
Well.
The only poet who read as much, if not more than Pound, is T.S. Eliot.
Mm-hmm. So you can keep up with him.
Yeah, that's it.
Il Signor.
So no, I came to a lot of poets late, and they impacted me. I don't know that I've found a poet who's influenced me as a writer in the past 20 years, 15 years, because I got all of them out of the way so fast.
Mm-hmm.
I remember that, you want to end by talking about the loss of a writer and how it made you feel. I don't sound anything like Seamus Heaney. I just don't. I mean, he's the natural heir of W.B. Yeats. He is the best Irish poet since Yeats. And that part is, I think that's undeniable, but he's the first contemporary poet I ever read because of my instructor. Mm-hmm. And I had moved here in August of 13. And my wife was still picking me up and taking me home from work because I hadn't yet taken the buses. And I got in the car. Oh, okay. I got to keep it together. I got in the car. She said, I have some bad news.
Oh.
She said, Seamus Heaney died.
Yeah.
And I just bent over and wept the entire car ride home. You've got a story like that. You've got someone like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because that was the one I wanted to meet.
It was a horrible day.
It was. When Vonnegut died.
Did you cry?
I did.
What about with Vonnegut?
Yeah.
You cried with Vonnegut?
Yeah. But that was, the thing with Vonnegut was, I knew I'd never meet him.
Yeah.
Doctorow, there was a good possibility I could have met that man.
Yeah. Because he'd have gone on tour.
Yeah. And I did cry. I cried because I lost the opportunity.
Yep.
That one burned bad. No, and it was on, this was back when I was living at Steeplechase, and it was on the morning news. I was getting ready to go, come to work. And they announced it. He had passed away the night before.
How old was he? Do you know?
He was in his 70s, I believe. He was up there. But it was the idea I could meet this man.
Yeah.
Somebody that I admire, somebody, I love his books. I mean, Ragtime, you can't read Ragtime and not love that fucking book. It is a phenomenal book. I would like to meet DeLillo at some point, but I don't think it's ever going to happen.
I don't think he's touring anymore.
I think,
oh, if he tours, though, and goes to the UNCG, you and I are there, man.
oh yeah. Or Guilford. Part of the speaker series in
Yep.
Guilford, when they start that back up again. The one that I think is more of a possibility of me meeting than DeLillo is Christopher Moore.
Oh, yeah.
I could definitely meet him. So I've still got that hope that one day I can meet Christopher.
Well, he's not too old yet, is he?
No, he's in his 50s now. He should be. He's part of the older cohort of Gen X. We were talking about books that impacted us. I saved this one. And then we need to talk about the greatest storyteller that we have ever seen as a collective. Slaughterhouse-Five. That, you talk about books that changed. It didn't change what I wanted to do. It didn't make me want to be a better writer. I try to emulate Vonnegut sometimes. But just the impact that book had on, this is what you can fucking do with a book. This is what you can do with a story. Listen. Billy Pilgrim has come unstuck in time. Here we are, trapped in the amber of the moment. There is no why.
Yep.
Holy shit.
How do you write that? Because the best fiction writers are poets.
God.
And Vonnegut was a poet.
All this happened, more
More
or
or
less.
The best fiction writers are poets.
Oh.
They really are.
And then I read Rosewater, and then I read Breakfast of Champions, and then I read Sirens of Titan, then I read Cat's Cradle. God. Nothing in this book is real. He tells you on the third page of the book. You haven't even got to the title page.
Yep.
And he tells you on that third page, the third leaf, nothing in this book is real.
The only book I know of that's as tricky as that is Lolita.
Yeah.
Dear reader, I'm a psychiatrist. Don't trust anything Humbert says.
Yep.
He will suck you in.
Yep.
Son of a bitch, and he does.
He does.
And you've been warned not to trust him, but
Yep.
you want him to succeed. You want him to have sex with an underage kid.
Yeah.
What is your problem?
Opening line of the book, Lolita, light of my life,
Yeah.
fire of
my
my
loins.
loins. God.
And you're like, she's beautiful. She's like 15.
Yeah.
That's gross.
Is she even 15? I thought she was 13.
She might be younger than 15. It's gross. It's gross. And it's supposed to be gross.
Yeah.
And I was sitting outside of the Ole Miss library smoking and reading, and I heard these two girls going in, and they were so pissed because they're reading that book. Like, oh my God, Nabokov's a pedophile. I'm thinking, he's not a pedophile. His character is, but he's not.
He's not. When's the first time you read The Metamorphosis? We haven't talked about Kafka.
I read him in 2002
Yeah.
because I was teaching him as a grad assistant in World Lit.
Yeah.
And I read it, I'm like, whoa, this is a great story. It's so weird,
Yes,
but it's so good.
it is.
Yeah, I love Kafka.
I was introduced to Kafka by a friend in college. He said, have you ever read The Metamorphosis? I said, no. He said, you've got to read that story.
It's a great story. The Hunger Artist I like just as much.
Yeah.
That's a great story. I haven't finished reading The Castle yet.
We haven't talked about Ulysses.
And
the greatest book that influences that we both cannot stand.
the greatest book never read.
Yeah. Exactly.
I start on it, and when you get into it, it's not that intimidating, and it's a work of astounding genius.
Yeah.
And Joyce is that important.
Yeah.
And he's a great storyteller.
Mm-hmm. Dubliners is my favorite.
Dubliners is great. My favorite is Portrait of the Artist
I
as a
know.
Young
I
Man.
can't stand that fucking book.
I read it on an important day, though. I think that's
Yeah.
my attachment. I read it the day my dad left my mother.
Right.
I was reading it for my AP English class. I'm like, how did you do this?
Yeah.
How did you do this? You know, I don't know if I could talk about the greatest story ever told.
Well, that's Hamlet.
Well, yeah.
Not the greatest story. The greatest storyteller.
Well, that's
That we have.
That's Shakespeare. I
Well, no.
think.
That we as a generation have.
That we as a generation have.
Yeah. This would be a good little debate to end this thing on.
I think you're going to be unhappy with my answer because it won't yield much of a debate.
Go ahead.
It might be Vonnegut.
Okay.
I mean,
I'm going
for
to-
our generation.
Yeah. I'm going to argue George Lucas.
He's a great storyteller. I was thinking just writers.
Yeah. Well, he's a writer.
Well, he's sort of a writer. he's
Well,
not
no.
much of a script writer.
He wrote the original, and then he laid out the other two,
Yeah.
and then he wrote all of the second three.
Well, so you're not making your case, but okay.
Okay.
Because this.
Narrative, Jason. Narrative.
Episodes 1, 2, and 3 have a lot of problems, but the narrative itself, just the story.
The story.
Forget the script.
Yeah.
The story
Story.
is incredible.
Yes. That's why I say storyteller.
He builds worlds. My son pointed this out.
Mm-hmm.
Lucas builds worlds in a way that nobody in sci-fi can touch. And that's what makes him so good.
Him and Roddenberry.
Roddenberry's wonderful. Though Jacob, my son, makes an argument that Lucas is a better world builder.
He is, and I would agree. Roddenberry is commenting more on social issues. Lucas is trying to, how do I put this? Where Roddenberry is commenting, Lucas is not commenting. Lucas is explaining.
The question
Does that
is,
make sense?
It does, but the question is, could you have Lucas without Roddenberry? Because what do you think? What do you think Lucas is
Could
watching
you
in
have
the 60s?
either one without each other?
Well, you have Roddenberry in the 60s.
Yes. But then you get him back in the 80s.
Yeah, and I think
And
Lucas changed
He
him.
reinvents everything.
Yeah.
And I think without Lucas, yeah, Lucas changes him. But
Yep.
without Roddenberry, Lucas doesn't have
Nope.
something to start on.
Nope. I like Frederick Jameson's argument about Lucas. And it's a strange argument until you start to get your head around it, but he's not wrong. Lucas is writing nostalgia flicks.
Yeah.
But when you hear that word nostalgia for sci-fi, it's like, how can you write a nostalgia flick for something that doesn't exist? And he explains it.
Mm-hmm.
He's writing nostalgia flicks about the flicks he saw when he was a kid.
Yeah.
He's looking back at his childhood and
Yep.
trying to do it.
Yep.
And the son of a bitch pulls it off.
Yeah.
Except he's better.
Yeah.
In terms of just writers, like fiction writers,
Right.
I think it's Vonnegut.
I would agree that it's Vonnegut.
It has to
Vonnegut,
be.
Because he's doing things with narrative that we had. And it's so funny because he understands the basics of narrative and the narrative arc, and he takes it and he twists it.
Yes.
And that's, going back to Tarantino, he does the same shit.
Yep.
You know, when you watch a Tarantino flick, you know he read Vonnegut.
It's obvious.
Somebody's learning how to do this, and it's him,
Yes.
right? And you could probably make that argument with Smith, too.
Yes.
Character development in Smith rivals Vonnegut.
Yes.
The way he develops his characters and his stories,
Yes.
you see that in Vonnegut's work.
But Vonnegut is also, and I said it already, but Vonnegut is a novelist who is also a poet.
Yeah.
You can't write lines like stuck in the amber of the moment
Yeah.
unless you're a poet, because that's an image
Yeah.
that only a poet's going to think of.
Right.
And I think that's Vonnegut's gift, is that not only is the story good, but the language is stunning.
Call me Jonah.
Yeah. What?
Or John. My parents called me John.
I mean, you don't even know.
It's not even his name.
He's absolutely stunning, and I would say DeLillo's up there too.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So my favorite quote from DeLillo, it comes from Libra, and that's another great fucking book. But my favorite quote by DeLillo is, "He was never here, never there. It's like a problem with philosophy."
It's a great line. I still like. It's the only avant-garde we've got left.
God, I know, right? Yeah, I understand the movies, I understand the television, I understand the art, the music, but we've got full professors here that are studying cereal boxes, and the response is, it's the only avant-garde we've got left.
And that's DeLillo's critique of postmodernism.
Yeah.
As a postmodern writer, critiquing postmodernism.
And the Academy.
And
He's
the
going
Academy.
that entire book is going after the Academy.
It's going after the Academy, and it's going after big business.
The main character is the leading scholar on Hitler.
He's the chair of the Hitler Studies Department. Which is just
So
wonderful.
Stupid.
It's so good. But you mean our generation, the writers
Gen X.
that we cut our teeth on.
Mm-hmm.
It's a harder question to say the greatest storyteller.
The greatest storyteller of all time is Shakespeare.
Yeah.
Because he gives us the story.
But I mean, as far as writers that we read, I mean, we read Fitzgerald.
We read Fitz, we read Hemingway, we
Yes.
read Faulkner,
Yes.
we read H.T.'s a poet, but we read
Joseph Heller.
Joseph Heller.
Catch-22.
Yeah. Yeah.
How do you do that?
So the most problematic book in my library is Catcher in the Rye.
I don't own it.
I hate that book. I've never understood why everybody gets their panties in a wad over it.
Well, that's because you've never wanted to assassinate anyone, Brian.
Well, oh, Jason, I have.
Oh, well. You teach English after all.
Yeah. So, it's a cover. But no, I never understood. But again, I didn't read it till I was in my 20s.
It's too late to read that book.
Yeah, you have to read it as a teenager to get it.
I'll tell you, I've never read it. I've never read Catcher in the Rye.
You're not missing much.
I mean, I'm kind of
Whiniest
embarrassed.
fucking kid ever.
I'm kind of embarrassed because I know that takes away some of my street cred.
Yeah,
But we just never looked at it in school.
yeah.
Or we looked at it when I was so
It
young.
was always a banned book. Tropic of Cancer.
Well, to be fair, that book does go pretty far.
It goes really far.
I can kind of understand why you wouldn't want your high school kid reading that book.
Oh,
I get that.
Tropic of Cancer is so wonderful. Okay. One last thing and then we're done. Okay? We've talked about poets, we've talked about dramatists, screenwriters, we've talked about fiction writers. We haven't talked about artists. And in the humanities, artists impact us.
I've got one. I've got a couple.
I'm going to say Picasso.
Okay, yeah. That's not fair. You win. I mean,
Who are you?
well, the first artist who mattered to me was Picasso.
Yeah.
But the artist that surprised me was Pollock.
Yeah, right.
And I saw Pollock for the first time, and I thought, this is it. Bless you. And Ed Harris plays he is Jackson Pollock.
Yeah.
And he's incredible. But I thought maybe I may not have the same experience if I see him live, well, not live, but in person.
Yeah.
And I went to the Museum of Modern Art in New York. You have got
Yeah.
to go when you go to New York.
I'm going to.
I stood in front of that painting and I almost cried.
Yeah.
It is massive, and it is breathtaking.
I say Picasso, a couple of reasons, and then we'll talk about one more, and then we're done. I keep saying that.
Yeah.
I say Picasso because Picasso changed the way that we viewed the world.
Yes, he did. You can't have Pollock without Picasso.
You can't have any of them
No.
without Picasso because he breaks everything down, and it goes back to that modernist ideal of We need to do a podcast on modernism.
Oh God, yes.
But he breaks down that ideal of
I'll talk a lot for
a
that one.
fractured world,
Yes, he does.
and you get to see it.
Which is what Eliot's writing about.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about that next week.
They're all writing about it.
They're all writing about it.
Everyone, even the guys back stateside, they're writing. I mean, Faulkner deals with fractured worlds.
Except Eliot comes out and says it. He talks about short fragments in the
Yeah.
wasteland. He's giving the game away.
Yeah. He
He's
is.
telling you, by the way, this is what I'm writing about.
Yeah. So, and then we'll end on this guy, Warhol.
Oh, well, Warhol is great because Warhol challenges pop culture by using it.
Yeah.
The Campbell soup cans.
Yeah. The most postmodern of all the postmodern artists.
Yes.
He did exactly what postmodernism is supposed to do, which is take the common, elevate it, take the elite, and deflate it.
Well, he couldn't have done that without Duchamp.
But Warhol did it better.
Warhol's great. Warhol's
Did it
truly
so
great.
good.
Well, there you go.
There you go. Well, that was an interesting one.
Yes.
So we had fun with that.
Better than our conversation on Gatsby.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think I'm kind of glad that it did die. Because I wasn't really into it then either. I was forcing myself through it, but I was already getting burnt. That's the problem. I love that book. I can talk about it all day long, but I'm just so tired of talking about it at this point because I've done 2 weeks of it.
Yeah, you need a break.
Yeah, I need a break from it. So
Sometime next year
in
we'll
the
do
future, well, over the summer we'll do it. That'll give me plenty of time to recover.
it. Give me time to read it too,
There you go.
because I haven't read it in a long time.
Yeah. Maybe I'll reread it again. I'll never get tired of reading that book. Ever. Because it's the masterpiece. It's our Hamlet.
It is.
It really is. I'm the barber, that's Dr. J. Peace.
Now it's time for Dr. J.